At this moment the powerful motor lifeboat from Scarborough arrived on the scene. Her engines enabled her to approach and take the remaining men off. As the two lifeboats backed away, 3 huge seas in succession lifted her off the rocks into deep water. She was badly hulled and in a sinking condition. Nevertheless, her mate, her engineer and a Filey man volunteered to board her. They were transferred at sea from the Filey boat, which had now 39 men in her, to the powerful Scarborough one, and were put aboard. Fires were still alight and steam up. Escorted by the 2 lifeboats, she made for shallow water, sinking all the time. She just got there and was beached on the sand. The sea off the brig end is not a lady's garden. It is only fit for Vikings to play in. In those waters it is necessary at times to be very quick. I remember learning a lot of navigation there from a pulley block, on a day when Jack and I were returning from Scarborough in a bit of weather. The netting of salmon is a business in which several boats are engaged every season. Salmon and sea trout come in from the deep on the north side of Flamborough Head. I have never heard of any being caught on the south side of the headland, and follow the coastline northwards. No fish, to my knowledge, has ever been caught on the north side of a net. All fish are working northwards, and therefore strike their nets on their southern side. They are making for the River Esk at Whitby and other rivers farther north. To the uninitiated, the setting of a salmon net may seem to be a simple matter, but great skill is required if results are to follow. The skill lies chiefly in forming the trap. The difference in methods and results obtained is very marked. It is a pity that more visitors do not take the opportunity of making their friends a present of a freshly caught salmon or sea trout at a figure, if a fish is bought direct from a boat, which is considerably below shop price. Visitors would also have the satisfaction of knowing that they were doing a good turn to the fishermen. The majority of the fish appear to follow the shoreline just outside the breakers, no doubt feeding on shrimps. Others, who have dined well before making Flamborough Head, go straight across the bay without coming inshore. Although many attempts have been made to catch both salmon and sea trout in the bay on a rod with fly or spinning bait, I have never heard of anyone being successful. The salmon boat is anchored close to the trap. The fish strike the stop net, run up it to find a way round, and get into the trap. The corks start dancing, the salmon boat approaches, the man with the gaff does his part, and a 25-pounder lies in the bottom of the boat. Unsporting way of catching the king of fishers, I hear a rod fisherman say. I do not think it is. I have caught a fair number of salmon on rod and line. I am quite sure that netting is more merciful. It has therefore its merits from the salmon's point of view. During the Great War, fishermen carried on their work of supplying the nation with food, of which it stood surely in need. They did this at great peril to themselves. The Royal Navy laid down rules as to where they were and where they were not to fish. But, as a fisherman said to me, haddocks know nothing about regulations, so they went where haddocks were to be found, and damned the consequences. They had marvellous escapes, and many of them lost their lives. 6 herring cobles manned by Filey fishermen left Scarborough harbour to haul their lines, which they had shot 7 miles out. 2 men were washing out the fish hold when the man at the wheel sighted a submarine ahead on the same course as themselves. They could not make out whether she was British or German, and they had their lines to haul, so kept on. They proceeded like this for 4 miles. Presently the submarine came alongside one of the Cobles, took the crew off, put a bomb aboard and blew her up. Before he could sink another, a destroyer came racing up, too late however. The submarine submerged, taking 3 fishermen with him. 2 days later he sank a cargo vessel 80 miles east of the Northumberland coast. Having put the fishermen on board the cargo ship's boat, he disappeared, leaving the crew to find their way home. On another occasion, one of the same herring cobbles was hauling her lines in a prohibited area, when she sighted a steam drifter coming towards her. When the drifter was within hailing distance, a submarine appeared. The drifter, which was evidently not on a fishing expedition, opened fire. A pretty little battle was raged round the fishing boat hauling her lines. Eventually the submarine submerged. The drifter claimed to have hit him hard. The Coble was fined £32 10s for fishing in a prohibited area, and, by being in the line of fire, obstructing the drifter in the execution of her duty. Several trawlers returned to Scarborough with live mines in their nets. They could, of course, have cut them and so rid themselves of their dangerous companions, but it would have spoilt the nets to do so. Imagine the nerve of the crew of a trawler which was seen steaming back to port with a live mine in her net, drawn up to the ship's side, one of the crew smoking his pipe, sitting with his legs overside, fending it off with a boat hook. The Royal Navy found considerable difficulty in making some of the older skippers understand their sailing instructions. The old school were not used to modern instruments and charts. They could navigate the North Sea by their own methods. They could at almost any time find their position by means of a large lead sinker with a hole in it. The hole was filled with tallow, which picked up sand or mud on the bottom. From an examination of it a skipper could tell where he was. But there is more to it than can be explained by ordinary methods. These men lived more on the water than on land. Their ancestors for generations have done the same. They have senses which landsmen do not own. It would be as reasonable to ask guillemots why they do not lose themselves between Dogger and Flamborough's Head as to ask these men to explain how they could find their way about the waters which lie between Grimsby and the shores of Iceland. Towards the end of the war, Jack and the other Filey men were taken to the Mediterranean to man drifters sweeping for mines on the Palestine coast. When the armistice was signed, his boat was at Port Said. Together with other drifters, they were ordered to return to England, their first port of call to be Malta. Jack's boat was delayed owing to repairs, but her skipper, a Grimsby fisherman, who knew every mile of the North Sea, but was not learned in scientific navigation or in the geography of the Mediterranean, promised to catch them up, although the most he could get out of his boat was 5½ knots. "Now, my lads," he said, "we shan't touch any land before Malta." Second night out they touched a big piece, having piled themselves up on the coast of Africa. It was no use waiting for flood tide in those waters, so they set to work rowing the anchors out and eventually pulled her off. By the time they found Malta, which they did by stopping ships and asking the way, the crew were sweeping the bunkers for coal dust. They were there attached to a convoy in charge of a naval officer and arrived home in safety. The first German mine to come ashore on our coast arrived behind the brig in a east-northeasterly gale. Jack found it when down the cliff on a rope looking for fishing buoys or anything else of interest which might have drifted in. It is a very good corner for such things, but is difficult for access. His Majesty's Government paid him £1 for reporting it, and were very anxious to get it in order to study the mechanism. Some fishermen found another mine a little way up the coast. They found difficulty in rolling it ashore, owing to the horns sticking up on top of it. One of them tried to knock them off with an oar. Special angels guard such men. The mine did not explode. The war, which no one wanted, came to an end. The men returned to their homes, some of them. Old occupations were resumed, as far as possible, for many were lame and sickly. The supply of fish was good, owing to the absence during war years of many boats on other duty. A young generation is growing up who know nothing of it. We are homeward bound. We have hauled our lines and have a nice fry, Jack and I, sitting together in the stern, discuss plans. A hailstorm sweeps over the bay, blotting out land from view. Hailstones oilskins and rattle on the bailing buckets in the boat. The storm passes on. Once more we see land, and note that smoke is rising from the chimneys of the houses. Round she goes. We are on the edge of the breakers. The rudder is unshipped. We pull her in. Now we hang overside, waiting until our feet can touch bottom. The water is cold today. I got one over my boot tops in launching. We haul her up as each breaker gives us leverage. The launchers are in the water with us, bringing the boat's wheels. Backs under her stern, we heave her up. Chains are made fast, and 4 powerful horses drag her from the sea to rest among her sisters on the Coble landing. We stamp our feet and flap our arms to set the circulation going. "What about tomorrow?" "Don't much like the look of it," says Jack. "We'll see what sort of a morning it is." And so we part. As I walk slowly up the hill, I feel that sea boots and oilskins are a proper clothing for a man.